not around, have you found I'm always on your mind? And when you hear my name, does it sound the same as you felt when you heard it last time? Do you see flowers in my hair that aren't really there? Do you feel the pain when I'm blue? And when you see me, does it seem to be that blues change to life in bloom? 'Cause this is how I see you, and these are the things you do. You may not know, so I'm telling you so, the best way I know how to. Welcome, everyone, to the Boiling Point Podcast Live. This is episode 102, Spy Balloons and Train Wrecks. I am your host, JD, and I'm being joined by my senior faith correspondent, Pastor Gavin Whitcomb. Pastor, welcome to the Boiling Point Podcast Live.
Thank you, and welcome to our listeners and viewers.
Absolutely. Marcus Frederiksen played us in. He does all the music here on the Boiling Point Podcast. Check him out at reverbnation.com/Marcus Frederiksen. Check out our storefront, bonfire.com/store/the Boiling Point Podcast, all in lowercase. We are only going live on Facebook right now. YouTube won't let us go live, and we haven't worked out logistically to go live to Rumble. But make sure you follow us on Facebook, YouTube, and Rumble. Hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to check out Pastor Gavin's channel, also on YouTube. Just search Gavin Whitcomb Sr., and you will find his channel. Pastor Gavin, there's been some crazy stuff happening in the world since we last did an episode. Train derailments, spy balloons, things are getting crazy and dangerous out there, aren't they?
Oh, they sure are. Yep. I remember growing up, I used to hear like some people would be afraid of flying, in airplanes. And then I've heard other people say, well, that statistically flying is much safer than traveling in an automobile because a lot more people are killed in auto accidents than in plane crashes. And that's true. And so by the same token, if you figure all the trains that are running in this country, the relative number of train wrecks are not that many when you consider how many are successfully operated without any incident.
Yes, actually, that's it's great that you brought that up because I actually have some stats here. People thinking that these train derailments are happening with more frequency now, that they're happening with more often than they should, and that they're more dangerous than they should, some of these train wrecks. But we're going to go over some stats here that will tell you otherwise. I've looked up some of the train stats, and I went all the way back to 1975. First of all, a train derailment comes anytime a train car comes off the tracks or leave the tracks. Not every train derailment results in a huge wreck with cars and massive amounts of damage. Now, in 1975, there were 6,328 train derailments, okay? That number went down to 2,112 in 2000 and then dropped again by 2021 to 1,087. And last year, there was only 1,044 train derailments. So according to the stats, train derailments are down, very much so. In terms of safety, passenger safety, according to a study by Ian Savage, an economist at Northwestern University, he analyzed transportation fatalities between the years of 2000 and 2009 and found that commuter rails had a death rate of 0.43 deaths per billion passenger miles. Okay, so that means for every 1 billion miles traveled by passengers, there was 0.43 deaths. Now, for a comparison, the number associated with automobiles is 7.28 per billion passenger miles. Okay, so less than half a death per billion passenger miles, and then 7.25 deaths per billion passenger miles. The trains and automobiles comparison there. So by comparison, trains are very, very safe. They actually have a really safe record. The problem is when there is a train wreck, occasionally they can be very serious and catastrophic.
Yeah, and it's kind of like the analogy of airplanes. Airplanes are very safe to travel in statistically. It's just when there's a plane crash and a lot of people at one time die, everybody takes notice and it's reported on the news. I guess because there's so many at the same time. But yeah, it's kind of like the same with train wrecks.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, actually, I didn't write down the stat for the planes, but trains do have the best in that study. The study by Ian Savage, trains have the lowest passenger fatality stat. It is trains. Even planes was even higher than the trains were. So, in terms of overall passenger safety, trains is the safest way. And this country, according to the stats, it is the safest way to transport hazardous materials as well.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Now, there's been the train derailments that have been getting some attention, and especially Norfolk Southern. They're the company, the train company that had the big one, and we're going to get to that in just a second. But they've had 3 train derailments in the last 2 months. February 3rd in East Palestine, Ohio. That's the big one. That's going to be the one that we focus on here in just a few minutes. That was the toxic chemical spill. That happened on February 3rd. On February 16th, 14 miles outside Romulus, Michigan, which is a suburb of Detroit, there was a train derailment. No injuries, no fatalities, just some damaged trains, and it wasn't a big one. There weren't many cars that jumped off the track. It was just a minor accident. And then March 4th, there was another accident. There were no injuries. There were no spills, but the wreck caused damage to power lines and caused more than 1,200 people to be without power for a couple of days. So Norfolk Southern, in the past 2 months, have had 3 train derailments. One of them, a serious one with the chemical spill, and then another one that was also pretty serious with the power outages. So Norfolk Southern is, before even this last one, they had already started making adjustments to their safety guidelines, and they're going to be making more changes now. But we're not on track. The train wrecks this year are not an increased. There's nothing happening. There's nothing crazy happening. It's just the attention that the people are giving it and the attention that the mainstream media is giving these train wrecks.
Yeah, sometimes there will be a train and I'll be driving somewhere and the train comes across the track. So, the gate goes down and you got to wait there. Well, it makes me think twice about being so close. I might want to hang back a little bit in case something goes wrong. But more often than not, nothing goes wrong. I don't claim to be an expert in trains. I know I'm not, admittedly.
Let's just clarify that neither Pastor Gavin nor myself are an expert in trains, hazardous chemical spills, or the cleanup afterwards. Let's just be clear about that. Okay. We're just talking and reporting on something that's happening in the news using our intelligence and our basic comprehension skills to help you understand exactly what's happening.
Right. And I'm not an expert in toxic chemicals and what to do with them and all that. So, my understanding is the reason they chose to light the whole thing on fire was they were concerned that temperature would build up, and then those train cars with the toxic chemicals would be like a big bomb that would go off. And I guess they were figuring the best way to get rid of it would be to light it on fire. Now, I don't know if that was a good idea. I mean, you got to pick the lesser of two evils. So I guess they were thinking, hey, if this blows up, or if more groundwater contamination occurs,
I think
that could be worse. It'd be better to get rid of it as much as we could. So whether that's right or wrong, I'm not a toxicologist. Hazardous material, expert.
Yeah, I believe that is what. Let's talk about that the chemical spill, the one that's spilled the chemicals.
Vinyl chloride. Yeah.
Yes, vinyl chloride. Yes, the train was carrying vinyl chloride. Vinyl chloride is an organochloride with the formula H2C equals CHCI. It is also called vinyl chloride monomer, or VCM, or chlorothene. Sorry, I'm doing my best with some of these. It's a colorless compound and an important industrial chemical chiefly used to produce polymer, or polyvinyl chloride, PVC.
Yeah, and PVC, a lot of like drain pipes are made of PVC.
Yes.
Chiefly drains. They do make water supply lines out of PVC. And
Yes.
yeah.
And it is also important to note that these materials are not carcinogenic unless they're burned, unless they're flammable. When they're on fire, they become carcinogenic. And if the materials seep into the ground and the water, then they become carcinogenic. The PVC pipe is not going to cause cancer. I want to make sure we make that very clear. At least there's nothing that I found that would say that.
No. And
Now,
PVC pipe for drains, that would be my choice. I mean, I do some plumbing with my home improvement and repair business. And, for drains, they're the best. They don't corrode like metals do. And now I don't care for them for water supply lines, but yeah, it's good stuff. Very useful.
Yeah, it is very useful, and it's only when it's caught on fire, or if the materials that create it seep into the ground and get into drinking water, that's when it becomes carcinogenic. Now, PVC, vinyl chloride monomer, or PVC, is one of the top 20 largest petrochemicals in world production. The United States is the largest manufacturer of it. China is also a large manufacturer of it, and also one of the largest consumers of it as well. When vinyl chloride is flammable, when it becomes flammable, when it catches fire, it produces a sweet odor and is highly carcinogenic. And it can also, again, infect the ground, soil, water supplies, that type of thing. And that's where it's when it can be very dangerous. Before the 1970s, vinyl chloride was used as an aerosol propellant and refrigerant. So those are just the facts that I have on the PVC and the chemicals that were spilled. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the timeline and what happened. I'm not going to go over the entire timeline. I do have links in the description of this video. Check out the links. You can check all of the information that we're telling you on this episode. You can check out all of the stats. So on February 3rd at about 8:12 p.m., a surveillance camera in Salem, Ohio, catches sparks shooting out from underneath the train. At around 8:55 p.m., 38 of the train cars derail, including 11 cars of the hazardous materials. Fires from all the cars that derailed damaged other nearby cars as well. The day after that, February 4th, the EPA arrives and is already on the ground conducting tests. February 5th, an evacuation is given to everyone within a mile of the crash. On February 6th, and this is what Pastor Gavin was talking about, they do what's called a controlled burn to dispose of the chemicals and the cars. Now, from the information that I gathered, this was done because the potential damage that it could cause to the water supplies and the ground was much more than the pollution in the air from burning these chemicals off and just destroying them. It would have been much more hazardous to let them on the ground and seep into the water, which is why they did the controlled burn. Is that the right move? Pastor Gavin and I are not members of the EPA. That was their decision, and that is what they decided. They decided that it should be a controlled burn and to get rid of it so that it did not seep into the water and the surrounding rivers in Ohio, which the rivers nearby are used for water supply.
Yeah, John, my understanding is that the watershed that these chemicals would affect and pollute, about 1/10 of our nation derives its water supplies from that watershed area going through the Ohio Valley there.
Yes, I believe you are correct on that. Now, the EPA has stayed on the ground. They have continued to be running tests. On February 8th, the evacuation order is lifted and people are allowed to return. On February 10th, residents returning to the town, to the city, complain of rashes and nausea within about a half an hour of returning. The EPA has continued their testing despite those reports, and all the reports say that it is still safe. Norfolk Southern, the train company that whose train wrecked, is providing bottled water, and the rest throughout the rest of February and even into March. People have still been complaining about nausea and being sick. The EPA still running tests, continuing to say that it is still safe, but they are also providing medical services, as is the state of Ohio, to the people who are saying that they're being sick. So potentially some people being sick, the EPA saying that everything is okay. That's all the information I have. I wasn't able to narrow it down, unfortunately, any more than that. Some of the information is not as easily accessible as you would think it is regarding some of this. So there is kind of a little bit of interesting thing happening with the potentially people being sick, but the EPA says it's safe, and they have tasked Norfolk Southern with cleaning up, but they have been, perhaps reports indicate that maybe they're being a little slow on the draw to clean up, because they have to do, there's a lot of things to clean up after the spill. Soil, they have to take the ground soil out and move it and dispose of it in a safe fashion because it's been contaminated. And so, but some reports indicate that maybe they're a little slow on the draw here in cleaning up. And the EPA says they won't wait around for them, that they'll do it themselves and then charge Norfolk Southern. But at least in the initial days, it appears that maybe Norfolk Southern's not getting on this as quick as they maybe should be.
Yeah. Well, we live in a fallen world, and sometimes things like this go wrong. And God gave man dominion over the earth, and so we're to try to be wise stewards of it. So we would want to do the best we can to try to keep it clean, but unfortunately, these things happen.
Yeah. Now let me ask you about that, Pastor, quick before we move on to the to the spy balloon segment. Mm-hmm. God gave us dominion over the earth to, it's ours. We're supposed to protect it and keep it nice and not just destroy it, obviously. But what about these chemicals? These chemicals that are used to make things that help our daily lives. But the materials to make them are hazardous, are dangerous.
Yeah.
So would you say that maybe we shouldn't be using these materials, or that the long-term benefits outweighs some of these little things that happen?
Yeah. It goes back to our intentions. What are our intentions by making these chemicals? Well, to better serve the human race, and there are people that need the products that we make from these things. So even though this chemical spill has taken place, the overall good accomplished through the use of these chemicals to make helpful materials for mankind far outweighs, the damage and the trouble. I mean, I feel bad that this happened, especially the people that live in that area. But no, it's just we do the best we can, but sometimes things go wrong.
Yeah. Now, what would you say, though? I mean, my counter to that, Pastor, would be the road to hell's paved with the best of intentions.
Right. Yeah.
So does it reach a point where, I mean, now I don't think we've reached this point, but do you think that something like this, for example, let's say train derailments of these chemicals started happening more frequently? Mm-hmm. Is there a point in which we shouldn't be then making these materials, even with the long-term benefits, even with the benefits that they give us?
Well, I'd say if something like this happens frequently and a lot of areas are damaged by it, then maybe we should rethink it. But in my estimation, the problem is more like, let's figure out ways to prevent this from happening. Maybe trains with hazardous chemical cars, tanker cars, maybe they should be shorter trains. I'm not a railroad guy, but
that is something. That is something that Norfolk Southern has said they're going to start reducing the
Yeah.
size of the trains. I mean, we're talking about, to put this in perspective here, Norfolk Southern and other train railways as well will to save money and cost you will use one engine to tow an enormous amount of cars. I mean, I'm talking about 5 miles worth of cars, more than 1,000, more than 2,000 cars on some of these trains. And I get for cost, the bottom line, they are a company, they want to turn a profit. But yeah, shortening the trains might be one of the ways to go. And I think load distribution too, because this particular train and the train that wrecked that took the power out, both of those were carrying cars that had contents and cars that did not have contents. And the way that the cars are organized in a train is the first stops are at the front, with the furthest stops being at the rear at the tail of the line.
Which
So
makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but maybe, like you said, the length of the trains need to be reduced, and perhaps what they're carrying, maybe hazardous materials need to be in one group and empty cars need to be in another.
Yeah, well, I saw the video footage of the car that was catching on fire underneath, and I guess maybe there was something wrong with one of the axles, or that's what I heard. I'm not certain, but
yes. What actually ended up happening was one of the sensors underneath. There was a fire. One of the bearings went out and it heated up and it caused a fire. And that fire damaged 2 sensors that would have reported back to the engineer that there was a fire. 2 of those sensors went out. A third one eventually detected it, but it was already too late. So they are talking about many different, again, we're not engineers, but they are talking about many different ways to help prevent this from happening again, from more sensors to power distribution. Ordinarily, a train is run by the locomotive, the engine, okay, and then it pulls or pushes the other tracks. What they're trying to do, and what Norfolk Southern has been doing, is making this power distributed so that way when the brakes are applied, they're applied throughout the entire train, not just at the engine. And when they go under power, it's not only coming from the engine, the power is being distributed across the train to pull them all at once, instead of it just being a pull and a stop kind of a method.
Yeah.
So a little quick recap. That's what's going on. There's only been one train derailment this year so far that has had toxic chemicals. There's not an increase in train derailments. They're not happening more frequently. They're happening. In fact, if anything, the stats indicate that they are going down, not up. So all this hysteria and all this chaos going around about the train derailments is just that. It's just hysteria. It's just the mainstream media doing what they do and not bothering to give you the facts. It's not that hard to say, hey, yeah, train wrecked, hazardous materials spilled. This is a terrible situation. But in terms of overall safety, engines and trains are still the safest mode of travel, not just for people, but for materials in this country. Stats don't lie.
Yeah. And I heard the Biden administration trying to blame this on Trump, saying that he lifted some regulations that had to do with breakings or delayed them or whatever. But the statistics don't bear that out. Like, from 2021 to 2022, there were less train wrecks. So you can't pin this on Trump. It wasn't Trump's fault. It's just one of those things that goes wrong.
Yeah, and in fact, from 2021 to from 2021 to 2022, there were 43 less train derailments in 2022 than there were in 2021. So even year to year, they're going down. And you can look these stats up. Look in the description of this video. And if you're watching, please leave us a comment. If you tune in, I see we have a viewer right now, leave us a comment. If you're watching this later, please leave us a comment and we'll discuss it on a future show. Pastor, the other thing that's going around, we're going to shift now. We're going to talk about these spy balloons that are all of a sudden now popping up. Would you be interested to know, Pastor, that these spy balloons and the frequency in which we're we're detecting them is not actually, it's just it's the fact that we're detecting them now. We did our military has improved our radar systems, and since then that's how we've been detecting all of these different balloons that are happening now, because we've made our radars better, so we are seeing things that we weren't seeing before. Okay. Now, for anybody out there who thinks weather balloons or scientific research being done in balloons don't happen anymore, I suggest you do some research. They are still very much a thing. It is a legitimate weather balloons, and even independent research through scientific research, companies doing research of their own. There are balloons out there. That's not new.
Yeah, and I watched the actual footage from China where the Chinese were showing some of their people the capabilities of these balloons. And a balloon that looks exactly like the one that we shot down, they showed them being used to launch missiles. In other words, they demonstrated on this video, this Chinese video, that these balloons can be armed with missiles and they can carry them and deploy the missiles. So they're very real. You know that they can be used in warfare to carry missiles.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to talk about the spy balloon that was going overhead. Shout out to Aaron. Aaron just said hello in our comments. Thank you for watching, Aaron. Make sure you go check Aaron out. She just started her own kind of a podcast series regarding makeup. Make sure you check her out. Shout out to Aaron. I do have you marked down, Aaron, at the end of the episode in my notes, but since you're watching live, we'll give you the shout out right now.
Hey, John, if I could say something about the spy balloons and all this.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I was born in 1961. Okay. So I'm 61 years old. So I can remember, okay, when it comes to the presidents in my lifetime, in my opinion, well, for many years, Jimmy Carter was the worst U.S. president on record. Okay, that was my opinion, and I'm sure a lot of other people thought so, because he was not reelected. Reagan ran against him and defeated him. But here, Jimmy Carter's administration was characterized by overt weakness. Like, he portrayed to the rest of the world that the United States was very weak. And so for example, the U.S. paid for and built the Panama Canal. Well, during Carter's administration, the Panamanians were saying, we want to own this. We want it to be our canal. So Jimmy Carter said, oh, okay, we'll sign it over to you. Weakness. And then the Iranians kidnapped and held hostage some Americans. Carter was weak. And so then if you look at bumbling Biden, we see the same thing. And so now other countries are taking advantage of it's almost intentional weakness and ineptitude of the Biden administration. Another thing, during the Carter administration, we had double-digit inflation. Inflation was just terrible. Well, what do we have during the Biden administration? So in my opinion, Carter was the worst president in history until I think Barack Obama was worse. But bumbling Biden is even worse. I mean, he's, in my view, worse than Jimmy Carter. And we also, during the Carter administration, had an energy crisis. I attribute this to our weakness in the U.S. Some of the countries, oil countries, Arab oil countries in the Middle East, they decided to cut production way back to bring the price of oil up, and it caused an energy shortage and an energy crisis. And so what did President Carter do? I don't remember if this was like an executive order or if he got the Democrats in Congress to pass it, but nationwide, get this, there was a nationwide speed limit of 55 miles an hour. In other words, across the whole nation, you weren't allowed to drive faster than 55. And the reason was to try to conserve energy and to save fuel. And if we would have just pumped more energy here, we would have plenty. But there is this energy crisis.
Yeah.
But what do you see during the bumbling Biden administration? An energy crisis, although it's like created by really foolish policy, like
Yeah.
not allowing closing the drilling permits off, up in Alaska and on the Gulf Coast, and making it harder for domestic energy companies to
Any stop the
invest.
pipeline. Yeah. Any
Yeah,
stop the
right. The
pipeline.
Keystone. Yep. And energy companies, they've told Biden that they're afraid to invest in American energy because his administration wants to shut them down. And I was listening to someone that was really informed on this issue. He says, when you build a refinery, see, we need more refineries
Yeah.
in this country. When you build a refinery, you invest a lot of money, and it takes about 10 years before you get any kind of return. It's a long-term investment. Well, who's going to invest in a company to refine oil if in 10 years they're going to be completely shut down? So the Biden administration's anti-energy, anti-fossil fuel policies are fueling an energy crisis. So it's the Jimmy Carter administration type scenario reoccurring: weak U.S. foreign policy inept, and energy crisis and double-digit inflation, very poor fiscal policy. So I don't know what the exact real inflation rate is right now, but I see the parallels between the Carter administration. And so what this has to do with the balloons is, I think part of this is our administration's weakness.
Yeah.
Why'd they let this thing go the whole way across the country?
Well, let's talk about that for a minute, Pastor Gavin. Because there are reports that says let's go back and recap how the spy balloon happened, and then we'll talk about why President Biden maybe waited. Hello to our new viewers. Please leave us a comment, and we'll give you a shout out or discuss what your comment is. So on January 28th, the Chinese spy balloon entered U.S. airspace. Again, balloons are up there. We've just updated our radar system. That's legitimate. So we are detecting more things than we were. But this Chinese balloon entered U.S. airspace in Alaska. It then transitioned over Canada before re-entering our airspace again over the continental U.S. in Montana. It wasn't until February 4th that the balloon was shot down just off the coast of South Carolina, where they did recover a good portion of it, lots of different components of it. It was actually in pretty good shape considering how far it fell. It fell from about 60,000 feet. So considering how far it fell, it's actually pretty intact. It did have equipment inside it. Okay. It had high-tech equipment that could be used to collect communication signals and other sensitive information. It had solar panels located on the outside, and suspended below the balloon to help keep it powered. According to the government officials that had reported after they started recovering some of this, it is clearly for intelligence surveillance and reporting back, as it has multiple antennas. And the multiple antennas were likely capable of collecting and geolocating communications, meaning that they could figure out where a communication was coming from and where they were sending that communication to. You can look up all this yourself if you'd like. Video of the balloon after they recovered it showed small motors and multiple propellers that showed that whoever was controlling this, China, could actively maneuver the balloon and change its course, and put it where they wanted it to be. So the Chinese are claiming that they lost it in bad weather, that it got lost in weather, and that's how they lost it. Understandable. That could potentially happen. Fine. However, once it entered U.S. airspace over Alaska, it was clearly under power. It was not lost anymore. It was clearly under power. Okay. The movements and the turns that it made indicated that it was under power, that it was not just lost any longer.
Yeah, and were they spying on themselves? It has spyware in it. Well, I'm
Yes.
using spyware, spying technologies. Yeah.
Yeah. And
You know,
officials
and
also, go ahead.
yeah, and okay, and I could see, all right, that's possible, but it's clearly a spy balloon. And the Biden administration, it was a private citizen, U.S. citizen, that saw it and recognized it, right?
Yeah,
And
people. Yes, it was.
right,
People. It did get, once it got out there that people knew. Then yes, but it was high up. It's not something you're seeing without
yeah,
like a telescope or high powered
mhm,
binoculars. You're not going to see it just with. You weren't just going to
yeah.
see it with the naked eye.
Then the Biden administration claimed that, oh, we didn't want to shoot it down because we were kind of spying on the spy balloon.
That is
We
what.
were
That is.
watching its capabilities. So, and okay, that's possible,
He
but
also.
how
He also.
much? I don't. I, I don't really like. I have as much confidence in the Biden administration and their truthfulness as I do in the Communist Chinese Party. I mean,
Well,
so
let's talk about the discrepancy between what, because a lot of people are saying, why didn't he just shoot it down? Why didn't he just shoot it down?
yeah.
And that is a reasonable question. What I got, the research that showed me was that for two reasons they didn't shoot it down. For one, that it was a large balloon and that it could have potentially caused damage by shooting
Mm,
it down over land. I don't know that if there weren't some stretches of land that they could have shot it down if they wanted. I don't know that, but
mhm,
that's at least what the White House is claiming, and that's what Biden said in his remarks, that he was advised by the military to wait to shoot it down.
mhm.
He also
So
did
that's
say
possible.
he also did
That's
say in his press
feasible.
conference that they did use the time to spy on the spy balloon so that they could see how it worked and see what they were doing. Now, let's assume for a moment that that is the case, that they didn't want to shoot it down over land because of potential damage to whatever that it could have caused. Okay. Um, That's fine. The other reason is that it's too high, that they were saying that it was too high, that at 60,000 feet and higher, that it's too high, that there aren't many planes and jets that can reach that level of altitude. And there's also some discrepancy about where our airspace ends. It's
Mhm,
according to international law, the airspace, a country owns its own airspace above anything above its ground. But how high up does that go? Where does space begin and airspace end? That is open for discrepancy right now, because in the stratosphere, there's not a whole lot of planes and man-made craft that aren't designed to fly at that altitude that can fly at that altitude. And then
mhm.
who does that altitude belong to? Is that considered space? Is it our airspace? We don't know. It's
Yeah.
not really clear. So that could be another reason why they didn't shoot it down. So potential damage, potentially because of the height of the balloon, it would have been difficult to shoot it. Although I don't know if I believe how about it being difficult. If we have a plane to shoot it down, it was the F-22 Raptor. It is a newer next gen plane, not one of the older planes, because the older planes, from what I understand, can't reach that altitude. But the fact is, we do have planes that can reach that altitude. So did we wait because of the damage? I'm not sure either. I'm with you, Pastor Gavin. I'm not sure.
Yeah, and I wonder, did the Biden administration not care? But since so much attention was drawn to it and people were saying, "Why aren't you doing anything?" Maybe they responded, "Okay, well, we better shoot it down just to show we're doing something."
That's also
Yeah.
the case. And he was asked in the press conference. I was going to show a clip of the press conference on
Mm.
this episode, but because we're not allowed to go live to YouTube, we're only going live to Facebook, which means that if Facebook takes us down, we're not live anywhere else right now. So I chose not to share any videos or pictures, so that we didn't get taken down due to any kind of copyright complaints or anything. So I won't be showing anything, unfortunately. But in his press conference, Yeah, he did. I don't know. People were asking him. Some of the reporters were asking him, "Hey, did you shoot this down because you were facing pressure?" And he didn't really answer it. I'm not sure if he did. It seems kind of weird to even after it was leaving our airspace to then decide at the last minute to shoot it down. It's possible because of the pressure he was under that he did shoot it down.
Yeah. Now,
Um,
my understanding is that they know for certain that this spy balloon went above some of our military installations, and we're gathering intelligence. So why would they let that happen? That's, unless they feel they had some way of blocking the signals so that that data could not be collected and transferred back to China.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point you bring up, because between February 10th and 12th, there were then 3 other objects that were spotted over the U.S. and Canadian airspace. On Friday, February 10th, U.S. officials downed a high-altitude object off the coast of Alaska, and then another unidentified object was shot down in Canadian airspace the next day, and then the U.S. military shot down then a third object that was over Lake Huron, one of the Great Lakes, on Sunday, February 12th. They were all shot down, and according to the White House, they were shot down because their trajectory or their path took them over sensitive information or sensitive things that they weren't allowed to. So that's interesting that you bring that up, that they didn't shoot this first one down until it was out of our airspace.
Yeah, and we have military installations in Alaska
But
too.
these other 3 were shot down immediately. Now, there is a difference in terms of size of the other 3 objects that were shot down and the China spy balloon, okay? The China spy balloon was much larger in terms of size than these other 3 objects. These other 3 objects that they shot down were not that as large as that one.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was safer to shoot them down. But again, we can only kind of only speculate as to why he waited to shoot it down and why he decided to shoot these other ones down. Seems to me like maybe he did decide to shoot these other ones down because of the pressure he was facing. But I also want to point out, just because Pastor Gavin and I are conservatives and we are not really fans of Joe Biden, that doesn't make us blind conservative Republicans either. We're not party, so we don't tote the party line. So I would like to point out that really only the military and President Biden know the facts. Was it too big to shoot down? Could they not have shot it down over the land without causing serious damage? We don't have those answers. Only they do. We can speculate from the outside, but we can only get the information that they give us. So while I'm not a fan of Joe Biden, I also want to point out that he shouldn't just cave to the mob just because the mob wants us to shoot it down doesn't make it the right decision. I wasn't in the room. I don't know the facts as they were as it happened. So I want to point that out. While I'm not a fan of Joe Biden, I'm not going to jump up and down on his back regarding this either, because I don't have all the information. They have the information. We only know a little bit that we know.
Putting this into perspective, I mean, I guess the main question that a lot of Americans are answering is, why was this spy balloon allowed to continue? And was that a good idea or a bad idea? To most Americans, it looks like a bad idea. But
I do also agree. I also think that I don't think I believe that whether through Canada or through somewhere in the States that there wasn't a safe place to shoot this down. I don't know that I buy that either.
Oh yeah, the northern Midwestern states like Montana and around there, they're very sparsely populated. And one of those other ones they shot down over one of the Great Lakes. And
they shot down another one in Western Canada too. One of the other ones that were shot down, and they haven't gotten to that one yet because of the region where it was shot down. It's remote. It's hard to access. It's going to take probably a few weeks to start recovering that one. But why wasn't it done with the first one? Then I don't understand it. Clearly, there are places we can shoot them down over land. We've just done it 3 times, but why not with this one? Is it because of the size? Is it because of the trajectory? Did it not go anywhere where it was safe to shoot it down? I don't have all of that information, but it seems interesting if nothing else.
Now, here's another thing to keep in mind. Now, I am not defending the Communist Chinese Party because, they're our enemy, but we spy on other countries too. And I'm sure we're spying on them.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And we're obviously in President Biden in his remarks said he didn't want a Cold War with China, that he's looking for competition, not conflict. He did not write those words. I guarantee it. He could barely say them.
Oh, yes. His speech writers.
Yeah, he's definitely got some better speech writers than he did a few months ago, but he did not write those. And I encourage you to go check out his press conference. Biden is still struggling. He's still reaching for words. He's not. This was a better interaction with the press than he normally has, but it still wasn't very good. You can clearly see President Biden does not have all of his faculties there. And he also definitely struggled with some words as well. So I encourage you to go watch that video. Again, I was going to share some of it on here, but YouTube has us at 2 strikes. And so we need to be careful. Unfortunately, we need to be careful about what we say, especially on live episodes, because I don't have we're not going live to our new Rumble station quite yet. Now, Pastor Gavin, perspective matters, as we've demonstrated on this episode. Both train wrecks, context, and perspective matters. We got a negative reaction from somebody who was watching. Please leave us a comment if you don't like anything that we're saying, or if you disagree with anything that we're saying. But perspective matters, Pastor, as we discussed. The train wrecks, they're not getting worse. They're not getting more. They're getting less, actually. These spy balloons, when they first came out, people were jumping out of the woodwork, calling them, they were for aliens and this and that. It was, it was amazing. It was astonishing to me to see the way that people reacted to it. Perspective matters. So how do people also use this, conservatives also use this as a way to try, when they were jumping on about aliens, conservatives then had to jump on and do what they do. And I'm not saying that any of these guys did this with malice or with ill intent, but it's always, well, we need to return God to our country. We need to get this country back to God, which I do agree with. But the way some of the conservatives try and use that line after certain things have happened, I don't really care for. If you're going to use that line, use it all the time, and then it's not just going to be when something bad happens.
Yeah. Well, I didn't really hear anyone say any of those things.
I should have wrote down some of the names of people.
That's okay. But I can imagine when people are saying like the chemical spill, that maybe sometimes when bad things happen to a wayward country that's rejecting God, sometimes God may allow some things like that to happen as a way to get people's attention to realize, hey, there are things in this life that are more important than just earthly things. And maybe this is God's way of getting people's attention. And I'm not saying he took his little finger down and knocked the train off the tracks, but he knew this would happen. But it is possible that God can allow some catastrophes in order to get people to realize their need for God. Maybe that's what they were trying to say. Because, human nature is such, myself included, we're all this way to a certain degree, that if things are going really well, and we have no problems, no difficulties or challenges or heartaches, sometimes it's easy for us to forget our need for God. But then when our feet get knocked out from underneath us, or we're going through some difficulty, there's something about that can wake us up and help us to realize, man, I need God's help. And so that's some of the good that can come out of this. So maybe that's what those guys were saying. I don't know. But that's just my perspective on it. Sometimes God can allow disasters to as a wake-up call, and also sometimes as judgment.
Yeah. Now, the reason I brought that up is because of course, the non-believers had to jump on, and they hate it when people mention God's name, and so any mention of God, they have to jump on it. But to me, it created another division. Now not only were we disagreeing about why the spy balloon was here, or what the spy balloon was, or why the train crashed, or what happened with the train, but now we're arguing about whether or not God was involved with it as well.
Yeah.
And I know people who aren't believers, but do believe in the Constitution. And these same people also, they just can't stand it when people say, "Oh, it's about God," because they believe this isn't a Christian nation, that there is no religion in this country. We don't have a religion in this country. We shouldn't have a religion in this country. Not to say that you can't believe what you want, just leave it out. Don't speak it out loud or do it outside, I guess. But isn't understanding and believing the Constitution, isn't that part of, don't you need God a little bit in order to fully believe and understand the Constitution? Aren't they? We've talked about this before, how they're connected, and how the founding fathers were Christian and did believe in Christianity and knew that this country needed God. In God we trust is on our money. One nation under God is in our Pledge of Allegiance.
Right. And God is referred to in more or less 4 different times in our Declaration of Independence.
And when our elected officials take the oath of office, they put their right hand on the Bible and they raise their left hand to God. I mean, yes, they didn't want us to have a national religion. Yeah, you're right. They didn't want us to have a national religion.
And they wanted freedom to not believe if you don't want to believe.
Yeah, exactly.
They want to be a wicked heathen and an unbeliever and deny God. Yeah, they wanted people to be free not to believe too.
Yes, but they also knew that this nation needed God, that we are a Christian nation.
Right. Yep. Yeah, one of our founding fathers said that our Constitution was designed for a moral and a religious people, and it's wholly inadequate for any other. In other words, part of it, in order for it to work the way that it should optimally, is that the people they would use the word virtuous or moral, and that we govern ourselves more, through the 10 Commandments and self-control than to have an external government power breathing down our neck and micromanaging every aspect of our lives. We were talking earlier about the spy balloon. That should remind us that we live in a world that where we have enemies, and ultimately we need to look to God for our protection. I mean, we can have the best defense in all the world in terms of military capabilities.
Well, we do.
But if God isn't protecting us, then we have no real protection.
And if you think that we are invincible, if you think this country is invincible, I would just remind you of Pearl Harbor and September 11th, 2001.
Right.
We're certainly not invincible. We like to think that we are, but we're really not.
Right. And you see, like God's blessing on our land. Like if the people as a whole are God-fearing and want to please the Lord, righteousness exalts a nation, and God will bless a nation that honors him. And so if we have God's blessings on our land like we should, then God would protect us from some of these disasters from happening. So things go wrong in this world and on this planet, but maybe if our people would have been more committed to God and more godliness and righteousness, then maybe the Lord would have not allowed this to happen.
One other thing that I do want to talk to you about before we get ready to wrap things up here. Shout out to Aunt Judy. Thank you for your comment. I wanted to talk to you because we live in a world now that's just as much online as it is in the real world. And information is now at our fingertips. What's happening across the world can be seen live as it happens now. Okay, we've never been more connected as a society. But also as a result of this, everything is rated. Everything is views, likes, comments, reactions. The more you have, the quicker you do it. I was there first. I was the first one to report it. I was the first one to say this, in the States. I was the first, everything's a race now. Everything is a race. And it's not just a race like it used to be where news stations competed for views and likes and comments. Now it's everybody has their own social media platform. Everybody now is online. Everybody has their own podcast, their own show, their own lifestyle videos. Everybody's competing for everything now. What does the Bible talk to us about any of this? This voyeurism. I mean, this online world that we've created, it's voyeurism run amok. Gluttony, pride, lust, envy, all of these things exist now, and they exist in a much different way than they used to. Mm-hmm. How do we balance that?
Yeah, well, like the primary desire of our life should be to bring glory to God. And so, it shouldn't be trying to bring glory to ourselves. So how can we best glorify God? Well, first of all, by being rightly related to him. Like our sins have separated us from God. So through what Jesus did on the cross, his death and resurrection, we who come to him with a heart of repentance and receive Christ as our Lord and Savior, then we're pardoned by God and we receive his forgiveness and his gift of eternal life. So then from then on, our desire should be, hey, I want to glorify God. I want to please him. I want to live my life in such a way that I honor him. So, trying to bring honor to ourselves and glorify ourselves is a part of what First John calls the pride of life. He describes the world, and he tells us, love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. By the world there, he means the ungodliness of the age in which we live in. So he says, love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. For all that's in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life is not of the Father, but is of the world. And so he mentions the lust of the flesh. That's desires that are, sinful pleasures that would be wrong. The lust of the eyes would refer to greed and covetousness. And the pride of life refers to like selfish ambition. So the need or the desire to like, hey, I want everyone to notice me and I want to be famous. And that's a part of the pride of life. And that's not of the Father, but it's of the world. So, our desire should be to glorify God, to love God with all our heart and love our neighbor as ourselves. So if we're doing things on the internet because we want to help benefit our mankind, there's nothing wrong with that.
Like what
we're doing, right?
Yeah, like what you do with your sermons online, and like what we do here on the Boiling Point podcast. We're about bringing facts to people and helping them understand what is actually happening.
Right, and sometimes on my YouTube channel, I'll check to see how many views I got. Not because, hey, I want to be famous, but I'm just curious, how many people am I reaching?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything should be. And then you're right. It's about motivation. What your personal motivation is. I do the same thing. I track the audience, but it's about to see how we're growing, and to see if an idea that I've used is helping us grow faster or slower than something else. But it's hard for the outside, for the two viewers who are watching. Unless they know me personally, which, if I'm not mistaken, the two viewers do know both of us personally. So they know that our motives are pure. But for anybody that doesn't know us, there's nothing we could do except to say that these are our motives and continue to demonstrate them through our episodes. That's how you really ultimately know someone's motives, is if they're consistently doing it for their own personal glorification, or if they're doing it because they want to help somebody else, or they want to help God or draw more attention to God and his word. So you do have to pay attention to what people's motives are. And we like to, we're here to help educate people and to teach people and to help people understand facts, because the mainstream media is not doing that like they used to. They're not reporting, they're not giving us the news and keeping us informed the way that they used to.
Yeah. And John, you were asking, well, we were talking about this question in what you wrote earlier, that is it possible to make America great again without America turning to God? Well,
Yeah, but
my answer to that would really be no, not really. Because the key to our greatness is that we were a nation founded upon biblical Judeo-Christian principles, and they contributed to our nation's greatness. And whenever the United States began to rise to prominence in the early 1900s, late 1800s, I think it was more like the late 1800s, there was a French philosopher named de Tocqueville who came to America to try to find out the greatness of this country. He said America's, he wasn't sure. He saw that, man, these people are like really Christian. A lot of them live it in their lives. I've never seen such a people upon whom the Christian religion had so much power. That was his words. And then he said, it wasn't until I went into the churches and then I realized the greatness of America. I saw the pulpits aflame with righteousness. He says, America is great because she's good. When she ceases to be good, she will no longer be great. And sad to say, one key to our country recovering and becoming great again, like President Trump says, is to have the government get out of the way and take its stranglehold off of the people and give us more freedom. But there's a spiritual component as well, and that's that our people as a whole turn back to God and honor Him. And then, man, when you get freedom and you have the blessing of God on your nation because He sees righteousness, man, that's a formula for making America great again.
Yep. Free market capitalism. That's absolutely right. Christianity and free market capitalism.
Yep. Yeah, not the crony capitalism where the government and companies team up together to exercise power, but free markets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is what the government's supposed to do. It's supposed to prevent the corporation, the crony capitalism, and keep us in a free market enterprise. They're supposed to protect the people and the rights and the freedoms that we have, not to impose their will.
Right. But you see, if you have leaders and elected officials who are not righteous and godly and don't fear the Lord, then when they take that oath of office, I swear to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States. Well, if they don't fear the Lord, they don't take that oath seriously.
Yeah, not to mention
where we find a breakdown.
Not to mention to someone who's not a believer that repeats those words and then finishes with "So help me God." Isn't that almost a slap in the face?
Yeah. They don't really mean it. They're just going,
exactly.
They're
clearly saying
they're just going through a formality. Oh, I got to say this oath in order to be installed into office. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, but years ago, people took it seriously because they feared God.
Yeah. Well, Pastor, I think we have successfully made enough people mad on this episode of the Boiling Point podcast. So I think our work for the day is done. I got a couple of things that I want to go over before we get ready to wrap things up. We're going to be having another episode with Pastor Gavin. Again, he doesn't know this yet. He learns things as I relay them to you. But I would like to have Pastor Gavin on an episode to talk about aliens in the next few weeks.
Yeah.
We are also going to do an Easter
UFOs
episode. Yeah, UFOs and aliens. I'd like to have you on for an episode about that. I definitely want to have you on around Easter time so that we can do an Easter episode. And of course, Pastor Gavin will be joining Keith, our senior global warming correspondent. We'll be doing another episode in our global warming series in the next couple of weeks. Look for that. Look for Pastor Gavin on YouTube. Just search Gavin Whitcomb Sr. on YouTube. Check out his channel and his sermons, and then share out your favorite episode and use the hashtag Pastor Gavin Productions. Hashtag Pastor Gavin Productions when you share out your favorite episode. I'm trying to get him his own hashtag going. Next Thursday, the 16th, we will debut Ms. Paz Becoming a Father series. That'll be next Thursday, the 16th. In the evening time, we'll be debuting that. And then every 2 weeks after that, we'll be running an episode of that series until we run out of episodes. It'll at least be for the next 2.5 to 3 months. We have enough episodes for about the next 3 months. So look for that. Also, next Friday, our sister show, next Friday, the 17th, our sister show, Mayhem Media, will debut another series called Tracking the Mandalorian, which is going to be a new series following the Disney Star Wars The Mandalorian series. And in May, our sister show will begin a Yellowstone series. We're going to follow through all of the different Yellowstone series, starting with the series 1883. We're going to talk, then we'll do the series 1923, which is still an ongoing series. And then we will also have Yellowstone itself in the series. I'm also planning some new short clips that I'll be releasing over the next few weeks and months called the Reality Check. The Reality Check clips, look for those. They'll just be short little information clips. Pastor Gavin and I are also developing another series, which we would hopefully like to debut this summer sometime, where we're going to go through each and every book of the Bible and try and help you understand what it's saying and what it means.
Right, and these would be a very brief overview.
Yeah, they're not going. They shouldn't be hour-long episodes. We're looking to be in the 30-minute or under range for those.
Yeah, kind of at a glance. Hey, did you ever wonder what this book of the Bible is about? Here's a summary.
Yep. That's what we're looking to do.
To give you a good overall view. So
look for that. That it's going to probably start. Pastor Gavin's a very busy man. So am I. So we're looking to try and do that sometime this summer. Maybe in June, we'd like to get that going. I'm going to give Erin another shout out. Shout out Erin, who sells her own makeup products, and she started her own podcast series about applying the makeup. She has asked me to do an episode with her to test out some of the men's products, so I'm going to help her do that. Make sure you check her out, Erin Santiago on Facebook. We have a new graphic designer, a graphic artist for the Boiling Point podcast and Mayhem Media, Robbie H., who is a creator of the American flag, has now created us our own logo for the Boiling Point podcast. We're going to be debuting that sometime this weekend. And on the next episode is when you'll be seeing that more. And thank you. Shout out to Robbie H. as our new graphic artist, so that we can start making some new logos, and we'll have that available on the storefront. Also, the storefront, bonfire.com/store/the Boiling Point podcast. Facebook, we're on Facebook, facebook.com/the Boiling Point podcast. Our Rumble station is rumble.com/c/the Boiling Point podcast. All of these are in lowercase. You can follow me on Twitter, JD at Mayhem Prez. You can follow me on Instagram, JDE Poster Designs. That's with a Z at the end of it. Check out JDE Designs on Facebook, facebook.com/JDE Designs. And of course, don't forget Pastor Gavin's channel, which I've said a couple times already. You can also find a link to his channels in the description of this video. Just search Pastor Gavin Whitcomb on YouTube. Senior Faith Correspondent, Pastor Gavin, thank you for taking the time to join me for this episode. I look forward to having you on again. Pastor Gavin, by the way, been on more episodes of the Boiling Point podcast than anyone except myself. And I am your host, JD. That's the end.